Hello everyone, and welcome back to building a podcast app with Python. Today, look at my to-do list board. I think it would make sense to tackle this ticket here, implement per user subscriptions. What does this mean? Well, for the longest time in Podcatcher, we've just had a sense of global podcasts, and no matter who I'm logged in as, I will see the same podcasts. So if I switch from my root user here to test user, and then view the site again, I see the exact same podcast. Whereas what I would like is for test and root to have different subscriptions to podcasts, and both view different things. So looking in the models documentation, I've seen these examples of like a membership field with groups and people. So I think I'm gonna kind of replicate this, but instead of a person, we're going to use the Django settings auth user model, and instead of the group, we're going to have our podcast with subscribers. So let's hop into our models here and try and implement this. I'm just going to pull up the documentation side by side. So instead of membership, we are going to have a subscription model. And instead of a person, we're going to have a user, and the user is basically just going to be this. User equals you, and we need to import settings. So from django.conf import settings, and the podcast is going to be the same kind of thing. Looking at the example, they have user and group, so our group is going to be podcast. And then we also need up here our subscribers, which is going to be a model many to many field, because a podcast can have many subscribers and a user can have many subscriptions. So this is going to be settings again .auth user model, and we're going to do through here subscription. And if all that has worked, then we should be able to create a migration, make migrations podcasts, and we should be able to migrate. Okay, that's good. I think in the admin, I would like to just quickly register a subscription admin, subscription, so I should be able to now visit the admin, refresh this, and view all the subscriptions, and I can create a subscription for a user for a podcast. So I think the next thing I want to do is when you search for a podcast, like Talk Python to me, and you click subscribe, I want to create that subscription automatically. So if we look inside views where I do this, we're currently calling import feed, we're ingesting the podcast, and then we're redirecting. So we just have a look at the logic for ingesting the podcast. We pass the podcast data after fetching it here, and then in a transaction we create the podcast and then create all the episodes. I think what I need to do now is do subscription.objects.create podcast equals podcast user is request.user, and I think I want to do this all in the same transaction. So I think I'm just going to move this transaction logic out of ingest podcast here, because I think it might cause problems if I start having nested transactions. So let's plop you there, and then with transaction.atomic here. So it's going to create the podcast and all the episodes, and then the subscription, and if any of these two fail, then none of them should work. And let me just fix the indentation there. Does this look good? I need to import subscription. Let's have a look inside here. So any errors? No, there's not. So let's just refresh this page just to make sure. And let's try and subscribe to Talk Python to me, and hopefully it should create a subscription for us. Integrity error. Not null, constraint failed. Podcast subscription, podcast ID. Interesting. Okay, so I think what I will do is just have a look in admin, see if it's created that podcast for us. It hasn't, so I'm going to go in here and just add a breakpoint, potentially. I might have to call podcast.save, but it looks like I have already. Okay, so let's go back here, refresh, podcast.id, podcast.pk, non-type. Oh, that's because, did I just forget to return the podcast? Yes, I need to return the podcast here. What was it beforehand? Let me just do git diff podcasts parser. Yeah, that's okay, so I accidentally deleted the return podcast line, that's why it wasn't working. Silly mistake. So just continue, let's refresh this again. And okay, so Talk Python to me has been created, but has it created a subscription? It has created a subscription. Fantastic. And this subscription is for my test user and Talk Python to me. Let me just address potentially this ugliness here. So let's go to models, subscription. What can we return for the string? Maybe let's just say the podcast itself. And what happens when I do that? Maybe just the title of the podcast. If we do that. Okay, yeah, so it's a subscription for Talk Python to me. Maybe I should be showing the user here as well. So in the admin, can I remember how to do this? Django admin. Let's have a look. It's definitely like a list of attributes, you can pass it. List display, I believe. So maybe inside list display for subscription, I guess we want the user and the podcast to make it easy to see who this is for. So yeah, so test user is subscribed to Talk Python to me. Okay, so now if we go back to the home page, on the home page, right now we're just rendering all the podcasts because it's like the podcast detail view, I believe, or the podcast list view. Right now I think this needs to be like the subscription detail view instead. So I think we can deprecate this list view and replace this with a subscription list. And then we're going to iterate over all of the subscriptions for a user, and we should probably make it required that you are logged in to actually view this page. So let's try and do that first. So Django login required. There's definitely a mix in here. Yeah. So we're gonna So for you to actually get to view your podcast, you have to be logged in. Oh, where is Vim going here? And it's no longer going to be a podcast list view, but a subscription list view. And this is going to be subscription list view, and this is going to be subscription list. And I imagine it will complain about the template now. So if we refresh this, yeah, it doesn't exist. So template is podcast list is now the subscription list. Yep, ignore. So we open up subscription list, refresh this. This is going to break because we're looping over the subscriptions, I believe. So for podcast in object list, this needs to be for subscription, and then subscription.podcast, and then subscription.podcast.podcast.image list, and then subscription.podcast.title. Yes. So we refresh that now. Okay, so Talk Python to me, we have a subscription here. If we log out, log in again, this time as root, I want to just quickly create a new subscription for our root user for stuff you should know, and then save that and then view the site. Interesting. So our root user has Talk Python to me and stuff you should know. If we log in as our test user has both of them. That's because we are not filtering inside our list view here. We're just showing all the subscriptions, not the subscriptions for the current user. So I think we need to say Django detail view to see what method we need to override. Sorry, list view. Get context data. Get query set. I think we need this. What does this take? So Django detail view get query set filter. Let's have a look. Let's try and copy paste some code. Oh, okay, so it just takes self. Yeah. So let's try this. Def get query set. I could have just used the type annotations there. So subscription dot objects dot filter, where the user is equal to the current request dot user. So if I refresh this now, request is not defined. I need self dot request dot user. Refresh. Requires either a template name or a get query set method that returns a query set. Yeah, I think I just need this. So subscription.objects.all, and then filter those. So we go here, refresh. It doesn't like that. Why doesn't it like that? Interesting. Get query set. Would help if I actually returned this. It's probably why it isn't working. Okay, so do I actually need this? I didn't. Okay, so test has taught Python to me. Excellent. And if I log out, log in again as root. Come on. Then view the site. We have stuff you should know. Okay, so we have subscriptions. Awesome. That seems like a sensible place to pause. In the next video, I'll pick up a new ticket, I guess. Thanks for watching.